Hi, I'm Katie Ewart, and I am going to be presenting Martin Luther's effect on the music of the Reformation. During this presentation, I will be covering Martin Luther's origin and musical background, his stance on music in the church, the impacts that he had on congregational singing, and his concern for younger generations, as well as feedback from the public after his actions. And before we start, I'd like to share this quote with you. It came from Ava Marie Grew. She said that Martin Luther, as a man and as theologian, was as far removed from the pietist as a thinker and a religionist could possibly be, and he accepted music wholeheartedly in every one of its manifestations and employments. As far as his origin and musical background, Luther was born on November 10th in 1483, and he studied music theory at the Latin School in Eisenach at the age of 14. Martin Luther's father, Hans Luther, wanted him to be educated for the purpose of one day becoming a lawyer to aid in the family law business. However, in 1501, Luther went from his school to the University of Erfurt to study theology, music, voice, and composition. Later, in 1505, he became a Master of Arts, which is a degree which included the study and teaching of Aristotle, while he was also exposed to nominalism and to humanism. However, rather than continuing with his legal training, later in the same year, Luther chose instead to enter the Augustinian monastery at Erfurt, much to the annoyance of his father. Then in 1517, the teaching of indulgences in the Catholic Church led to his nailing of the 95 Theses to the church door there in Wittenberg. And then in 1523, he composed his first song, which was a wonderful feat for him that would lead to very many more that he would write, which is evident because in 1523, clear up until 1524, he wrote almost 24 songs. He was very, very passionate about music, and he wanted to make it so that everyone, no matter their social status, could access music and be able to worship God in the way that they should. And while he was in his schooling, he was trained to write and identify different kinds of music. So he was seeing folk songs, chansons, any kind of music that had been popular up until that time period. And because of this, and because of his study, he was introduced and acquainted with several large names in music circles of that time. An example would be Josquin des Prez, which he studied with, and some of his music was definitely influenced by des Prez. And so going back to the 24 songs that he wrote, he would start translating Latin hymns into German, as I said, because he wanted to make music available for everyone. He would incorporate basic reformist principles into new songs as well. And this was because of the teachings in the Catholic Church that he believed was wrong after his time studying the Bible and studying humanism. So his stance on music in the church, he wrote about in his published work called Table Talk. He said that music is one of the best arts. The notes give life to the text. It expels melancholy, as we see in King Saul. Kings and princes ought to maintain music, for great potentates and rulers should protect good and liberal arts and laws. Though private people have desire thereunto and love it, yet their ability is not adequate. We read in the Bible that the good and godly kings maintained and paid singers. Music is the best solace for a sad and sorrowful mind. By it, the heart is refreshed and settled again in peace. Luther was really trying to take worship to the next level. And what I mean by that is he was making worship in the regular church service relevant and attainable to everyone in the congregation by writing hymns in the everyday vernacular of the people. Music from secular songs was set to theologically sound lyrics and many other things. Colin Holman had a great quote that said, Luther made the congregation sing. By writing hymns in the vernacular, Luther was making sacred music easily accessible to the public and not solely in the church. And he did exactly that. I mean, there are so many hymns that we sing today in church services that we may not realize were written by Martin Luther, but he definitely deserves the credit because he took the time to sit down and write these hymns so that we could have them today in the younger generations. And after having said that, he also expressed a concern for the younger generations. And he said in the Geistliches Zagbüchlein that he also published, he wanted to wean the younger generations from love ballads and carnal songs and teach them something of value in their place. He understood that if music wasn't for the worship and glorification of God, it was meaningless. And so he wanted to give younger generations a meaning and a purpose for music so that they wouldn't constantly think it was just this noise in the background that didn't have a place. Whenever he started writing songs, he would include part singing in his songs. So hopefully it would be more appealing to the younger generations, because if you really think about it, even today, if there isn't a beautiful melody and a complicated harmony, most kids today will turn their nose up at it and just kind of sneer. And he was hoping to avoid that in his time. He understood what the younger generations liked because he too was once in that position. And so now I'm going to be talking a little bit about the feedback that he received from the public during this time period. After he nailed the 95 Theses to the door at the Church of Wittenberg, the Catholic Church was absolutely livid. He was labeled as a heretic and as an outlaw for his actions, but he remained firm through all of it and made it publicly known that he was unwavering in his beliefs. All the way from the burning of the papal bull to the church appropriate trash talk towards Eck, he showed the public that he was unapologetically standing for what he believed to be right and theologically sound. He even made a proclamation of his faith at the Deed of Worms. And in that day, that was worthy of excommunication from church. He could have been, well, I should say he was already labeled as a heretic and an outlaw, but there were a lot of worse things that could have happened to him. And he was very, very lucky in that they didn't happen to him. And so now that I've given you a little bit of background as to Martin Luther and what he did during the Protestant Reformation, I would like to share with you just a couple examples of the songs that he wrote that are still very popular today, and that if you go to church, hopefully you will recognize. And so the first one that I will be showing you is called "A Mighty Fortress Is Our God." So I'm going to be pausing the song there just to give you a little snippet of what Martin Luther did. As I said, he was writing for the people of his time period, so that they could be singing this in the church in their own native language, so that they too could worship, and not just the people who had access to higher education to learn Latin and be a part of the high church patriarchal system. And I want you to keep that in mind as I have you listen to the last example that I have. And I was surprised to find that this song was actually written by Martin Luther. I had never heard that before, and I was very, very surprised. And I think you will be too. So without further ado, the next song is Away in a Manger. All right. So that was the last example that I had for you today. And I just really wanted to say thank you so much for the time that you've put into listening to my presentation. And I hope that you found it to be educational, and that you will keep this in mind as you go to church and you think about all the things that Martin Luther did to impact congregational singing. And so again, thank you so much, and I appreciate your time.